Now I have the band on, and what I did was I picked up 2 and skipped 1 all the way across, and I did it in such a way that I filled in every empty needle. And it's not a bad idea after you've done this to go back and make sure that there are no needles that are empty. They should all have a loop on them. And I have brought these needles all the way out to hold position because it makes it a little bit easier for the carriage to knit back across when it has all this bulk. After all, the carriage has to push the needle out and then pull the needle back. Well, if they're pushed out, I've already done half of that. Another thing that I'm going to do, just to remove bulk and make it more visible for you, is I'm taking off this waist yarn so that you can see what I'm dealing with right here. And down here is the waist yarn that was at the bottom. And this comes off when I pull the ravel cord, but I'm not going to bother with that just yet. I think this is going to knit off. The carriage tension has been loosened for the loop through a loop bind off. And if you hand feed yarn like I often do, you do have to pull up a little at the beginning of the row. And then I'm just going to do the loop through loop bind off. I'm going in this direction because this is where the end is. It's a latch tool bind off, and I'll just quickly do a few at the one end as a review. But this is shown in more detail on the bind off lessons among the beginner lessons. So I'm just kind of pulling them off the end in a loop through a loop. Well, it's time to get this waist yarn off and see how this neck turned out. So let me get this off. I'll just pull this ravel cord. Okay. So the waist yarn is off, and I think that's a beautiful neck. The most important thing is that I got it absolutely straight. I don't see any little spots where it wandered over going all the way down this neck. Now the next step is going to be to make this side of the neckband, and I want to warn you that this one is a little different. The procedure is different because the back has some waist yarn holding some open stitches. The first step to making the other half of the neckband is to determine the number of needles. And all I'm going to do is use the same number of needles for this side of the neck as I used for that side of the neck. And then I'm going to use exactly the number of needles that are on the waist yarn on the back of the neck. But I'm going to pick up 2 and skip 1. So every third stitch on the waist yarn is going to be an empty needle. But I count them all to figure out the needle numbers on the needle bed. Okay, I have the waist yarn, I have the ravel cord, I have the comb, I have a weight on each end, I've got my handy clothespins, and this is where I do my first row of the second neckband. Now remember, this was the loose row. I have it turned all the way up, so it is very, very loose. As soon as I do that row, however, I'm going to tighten the tension back down to my normal band tension. And since the bands are 20 rows deep, I'm going to knit another 19 rows. This is the last bit of knitting in my garment yarn, this 20 rows for the second band. And if anybody's keeping track, I use 2 skeins of the striped I Love This yarn, and I use almost every bit of a full skein of the solid. The solid is a larger skein, 7 ounces. Now I'm going to take this off on waist yarn and hang the neck. When I hang the back of this neck, I'm going to hang right side facing me, and I'm going to hang it so that I pick up 2 stitches, and this is a little bit different. After I hang those 2 stitches, then the third stitch is just not going to be hung. Get that first one there. So I pick up this one, and I pick up this one, and here is a stitch on the waist yarn that I skip. So I'm actually skipping some stitches as I hang the back of this neck. Now here's the next stitch that I skip. It doesn't show very well because it's white. And then here's the next one. and here's the next one. I do that on across the back, and then I'm going to pick up the neck the way I picked up the front neck. Here is the neckline hung on the needles, and here is the band. I'm going to put the band with the right side against the sweater, with the ravel cord end up and the loose stitches up, because every one of these stitches has to be yanked through the neckline. That's why they were made loose. And I will just begin on the right hand side here, hanging them up. Now remember, these go on the needles that I just hung the neckline on. These do not fill in empty needles. Those don't get filled in until a later step. So I just grab these and pop them on. It's really an easy part of the job. And you can speed up and start picking up 2 at a time. Now I picked up some ravel cord. Get that off. So I'll pick that up and then I'll be back to pull them through. You might be wondering why I'm hanging weights on. Well, without the weights, it curls, and it wants to curl right off of the hooks of the needles. At this point, I take the needle pusher and I close the latches. And I just take my time and make sure that I get all of them closed. And then I start to work the stitches back so that they can be pulled through, just like that shoulder joint. And then with a good sharp push, they'll go on through. Now, I mentioned earlier that when I put these back stitches on that are on some waist yarn underneath here, that there is a stitch every third stitch that I didn't pick up. There's nothing holding it but the waist yarn. So I'm just kind of poking my finger under it so that I can see it, and I'm catching that stitch and hanging it on the empty needle. And I want to be careful and not miss any of them. So I just take my finger and poke it up under here and pull this hem out of the way so that I can see it. Now I couldn't hang it earlier in the process because I was going to push all the needles back. So I would have pushed the needles all the way out. I'm going to start picking the hem up at the left-hand side because the left-hand side still has empty needles that need to be filled in. So I'm going to go to the second in this pair of needles. And then the next one I pick up is going to go on an empty needle. And then the next one, skip one, go second in that pair, and then on an empty. Because at this stage of the game, I want every needle filled, because I'm about to close this hem. And you always close a hem with every needle. Okay, I'm just taking the waist yarn off so you can see the folded hem. And again, before I knit across, I am bringing the needles to E position. I knit across at a very loose tension. And then I'm going to do the loop through loop bind off. Well, here I am binding it off, and you've seen this before. The last video on this sweater is going to be how to finish it. And I just can't overemphasize finishing. Nobody seems to be able to resist, if you say you made it, nobody seems to be able to resist looking at what you made and looking at the quality of your finishing. It seems to show more than anything else you do. And there are lots of little tricks that make finishing beautiful and a pleasure to do. I will show how this particular sweater was finished, and if you followed this all the way through, you can make your own first project, or maybe you'll make this project just to do things a little differently, working with a different teacher, and see if you pick up something interesting along the way. I think the next batch of lessons will be about the garter bar. A final look at the neckband. Here's how it looks. This is going to be lapped over and squared off like that. This neckband encloses the inside edge, so the inside edge is completely covered, and it just sort of forms a tube. So, on to finishing.